The mid-1960s Mustang gets all the attention for its top-performing V8 models. But those who remember the simpler six-cylinder edition know it had a charm all its own. Back in 1965, the Mustang wasn't just a muscle-bound show-off. It was also a practical daily driver, especially if you chose the inline six. Sure, it didn't roar off the line like its beefy brothers, but it offered enough pep to merge onto the highway with confidence, and it could churn out mile after dependable mile without breaking the bank. This six-cylinder workhorse was known for sipping less gas than its bigger siblings, which meant the average family man could afford to keep it running. With fewer complicated parts, it was simpler to maintain, and its parts were readily available and cheap. The ride quality wasn't luxury grade, but what do you expect from a sporty two-door that wanted to be the everyman's cool car? It gave a comfortable enough drive for that weekend trip or daily commute. Of course, it wasn't perfect. Rust was a persistent nemesis, and some critics called it a secretary's car, implying it lacked true muscle. Still, the six-cylinder Mustang helped pave the way for a generation of affordable, sporty coupes. What people don't often remember is that, at its core, it was a reliable, nimble, wallet-friendly option that kept countless Americans on the road in style. When talking about the 1963 Chevy Impala, it's easy to get swept up by the sleek styling and the cultural halo it wears. Think lowriders, cruising the boulevard, and a certain West Coast attitude. But underneath all that, the '63 Impala was actually a sturdy, well-built car that stayed on the road for years without draining your life savings. Chevy knew how to build mass-market family cars that were both aspirational and attainable, and the Impala was a shining example of that formula. Under the hood, you could opt for a range of engines that, while not always blazing fast, were famously durable. The small block V8 in particular gained a reputation for being something you could run into the ground and still trust. Ordinary American households appreciated the Impala because it could serve every purpose, from taking the kids to school, to hauling groceries, to cruising on a summer night with the radio cranked up. Its roomy interior and soft suspension offered a comfortable ride, which made long highway trips more than manageable. It wasn't entirely flawless. The styling might have garnered attention, but the Impala's steel body panels were prone to rusting, and the handling could feel like piloting a sofa on wheels. Some folks grumbled that it wasn't as refined as pricier competitors. Yet despite these shortcomings, the 1963 Impala remains a testament to simple, honest engineering and value. Quietly dependable, it stood by countless American families, rarely letting them down. If there's one car that encapsulates the unflashy reliability of the 1960s, it's the AMC Rambler American. AMC was never as big as the Big Three, but this actually worked in the Rambler's favor. This compact car resisted the temptation to puff itself up into something it wasn't. Instead, it aimed to give the everyday driver a reliable, affordable machine that wouldn't constantly beg for attention at the service station. The Rambler American didn't win beauty contests. Critics sometimes called it styling plain, and let's be honest, no teenager hung posters of a Rambler on their bedroom wall. But beneath that conservative exterior was an engine and drivetrain setup that was simple and durable. The six-cylinder engines were less about performance bravado and more about long-haul endurance. This was the car you could rely on to start on a cold morning, and you didn't need a PhD in mechanical engineering to change the spark plugs. It did have its quirks. The cabin could feel cramped if you were used to bigger sedans, and the materials inside felt basic at best. There wasn't the luxurious ride some might have desired, and it certainly didn't have the cruising swagger of a Mustang or an Impala. But that was the point. It wasn't about flash, it was about function. In a world obsessed with ever bigger, ever faster cars, the Rambler American quietly went about its business. Keeping hard-earned dollars in your wallet, improving reliability could come in unassuming packages. The Plymouth Valiant might not top many collectors' wish lists today, but ask someone who actually owned one back in the day, and chances are you'll hear a story about rock-solid dependability. Emerging in a decade where chrome and size often trumped practicality, the Valiant stood out by focusing on delivering good value. It was a car that the average Joe could afford, run day after day, and keep on the road for years without a second mortgage. Under its quirky styling, some called it odd, others found it charming, beat an engine that refused to quit. The slant six engine is legendary for its durability. People joked it could run on rainwater and dirty socks if you ran out of gas. It wasn't fast, but it never pretended to be. Instead, it was a reliable companion, easy to service and cheap to maintain. On the highway, it hummed along quietly enough to make family road trips tolerable. However, the Valiant was not without faults. Its handling could be described as loose at best, and it didn't offer the plushest interior. Some drivers found its looks off-putting, and let's be honest, it's never been a head-turner. But the Valiant's persistence on America's roads was a subtle reminder that a car didn't need to dazzle to earn respect. This was the daily bread of transportation. Just enough comfort, just enough power, and just enough style to keep you going without headaches. Before we move on to the next one in the list, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you're enjoying this content so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks to all of you who do. The Ford Falcon was practically a poster child for no-nonsense reliability in the early 1960s. As the nation's priorities shifted toward affordability and efficiency, the Falcon arrived to answer the call. Ford understood that not everyone needed or could afford a big land yacht with a massive V8. So the Falcon entered the scene with smaller dimensions, simpler engineering, and a price tag that made many Americans breathe easier. Its compact size didn't stop it from comfortably seating a family, and its straightforward design meant fewer expensive repairs down the line. The Falcon's lightweight construction and simple suspension were well suited for the ordinary daily grind, and it could handle city streets or open highways without complaint. The engine options were modest, typically an inline-six that might have lacked raw horsepower, but offered the kind of longevity and ease of maintenance that your trusted neighborhood mechanic appreciated. Still, no car is perfect. The interior featured materials that felt more functional than luxurious, and the handling could be a little soft around the edges, especially if you pushed it hard into corners. Some drivers found its styling a bit too plain, and the car's compact stature meant less cargo space than the sprawling sedans Americans were accustomed to. But the Falcon won customers not by wowing them with extravagance, but by proving day after day that it could get you where you needed to go without emptying your wallet or leaving you stranded on the roadside. Mention the Corvair, and you might quickly stir up controversy. This rear-engine Chevy has had a tarnished reputation for decades, largely thanks to Ralph Nader's 1965 book, Unsafe at Any Speed. But let's set aside the heated debate for a moment and consider why early 60s Corvairs remain a fascinating part of American automotive history. In many ways, the Corvair was a clever, innovative little car, and before the scandal, plenty of owners found it dependable enough for everyday use. Its air-cooled, horizontally opposed engine was unusual for Detroit at the time, which gave it an appealingly different personality. By mounting the engine in the rear, Chevrolet freed up interior space and crafted a lighter front end. This did raise questions about handling, especially at the limits. But let's be honest, most people weren't flinging their family car around racetracks. For normal driving, Corvairs were comfortable, sufficiently peppy, and, given proper maintenance, surprisingly reliable. It's true that the early models had handling quirks, and that the suspension setup left something to be desired. The controversy over their safety was no small matter. Yet those who treated their Corvairs well and respected the car's differences found it to be a dependable and affordable mode of transportation. If nothing else, the Corvair stands as a reminder that innovation doesn't always meet universal acclaim. For many unassuming owners, this compact oddball just kept chugging along, proving that reliability can come wrapped in controversy. The Ford Fairlane nameplate might not generate the same feverish nostalgia as the Mustang, but in the mid-1960s, it was a reliable backbone of the brand's lineup. Nestled between the compact Falcon and the full-size Galaxy, the Fairlane found its niche as a sensible midsize option. While it never screamed, "Look at me," it quietly became a dependable partner for countless American families, earning its place through longevity and reasonable pricing. Under the hood, buyers could choose from a variety of engines, though the small block V8 often struck the perfect balance between performance and practicality. It wasn't a drag strip hero, but you could trust it to start on chilly mornings and not drain your wallet at the pump. Maintenance was straightforward, parts were common, and mechanics hardly ever scratched their heads when dealing with a Fairlane. This made it an easy choice for anyone who just wanted to set aside the constant worry of breakdowns. It had its issues, of course, Like many cars of its era, rust could set in if you weren't vigilant, and the interior might seem Spartan by today's standards. The Fairlane never commanded the spotlight, which left some buyers feeling it lacked personality. But maybe that's exactly why it was so appealing. At a time when automakers fought tooth and nail to stand out with radical styling or monstrous horsepower, the Fairlane focused on reliability. You might say it was the quiet friend who never let you down. Mention Studebaker, and someone will inevitably bring up that it's a long-gone manufacturer. By the early 1960s, Studebaker was struggling to stay afloat, which is why the Lark often gets overlooked. But let's give this underdog its due. The 1963 Studebaker Lark was a practical, well-built car that could hold its own on the roads, even if it never reached the sales heights of its more famous Detroit competitors. Where the Lark shone was in offering compact dimensions, coupled with a roomy interior. It was a sensible choice, a car you could park easily in crowded city spaces without feeling cramped inside. Engine options ranged from thrifty 6-cylinders to modest V8s, and while they weren't going to set any speed records, they proved durable with proper care. The Lark's engineering leaned toward simplicity, making it accessible for local mechanics and at-home tinkerers who wanted to keep their ride running smoothly. That said, Studebaker's looming financial troubles cast a shadow. Parts became harder to find as the decade wore on, and some customers worried about long-term support. The styling didn't always excite the public, and the materials weren't necessarily top shelf. Still, the Lark delivered steady, unpretentious service at a reasonable price. It's a reminder that in the 60s, reliability didn't always come from the biggest name on the block. Sometimes a smaller, scrappier contender could give you a solid car without making you regret your purchase. If you polled a bunch of old-school mechanics about the most reliable workhorses of the 1960s, the Dodge Dart would almost certainly show up on their lists. The Dart had a reputation for running seemingly forever, and that's no exaggeration. Dodge's humble, compact model managed to outlast many flashier contemporaries because it focused on what mattered: dependable engineering, affordable maintenance, and a sensible approach to everyday motoring. The slant 6 engine that powered many of these Darts is often spoken of with reverence. It's almost comical how tough these engines were. Stories persist of Darts soldiering on with minimal care, surviving neglected oil changes, and questionable repairs. This mechanical resilience made the car a standout in a decade when automakers were experimenting with style and speed, sometimes at the expense of long-term durability. The Dart put its energy into staying on the road and out of the junkyard. However, the Dart's Spartan roots were visible in its basic interior. The materials were hardly luxurious, and the cabin didn't exactly exude excitement. Some drivers found the styling playing to a fault, and the handling was more about comfort than precision. Yet none of these shortcomings mattered much to the working families who just wanted a car they could count on to start every morning and run reliably for years. In a world where cars often fought for attention, the Dart quietly earned respect the old-fashioned way, by never giving up. For some, the Buick brand conjures images of cushy, near-luxury cruisers that your grandparents might have favored. But the 1964 Buick Special stood out in an era when Americans sought both style and substance. While it was positioned as a more upscale choice, it still came at a price that didn't break the bank. More importantly, it established a reputation for reliability that even the thriftiest buyer could appreciate. The Special's available V6 engine was something of a novelty at the time. Buick's engineers wanted an engineer that delivered decent performance while sipping less fuel. This engine could chug along for many miles if treated with ordinary maintenance. The build quality was respectable too, with interiors that felt a bit more refined than the bargain basement compacts. Owners found that the car's suspension offered a comfortable ride without feeling disconnected from the road. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. Some thought the styling was too conservative, lacking the panache of more daring contemporaries. Others found the engine's power output uninspiring. Yet the Special's reliability, combined with its modest luxury touches, made it a clever compromise in a market where everyone was trying to find the sweet spot between cost and comfort. It may not appear on every list of 1960s icons, but those in the know understand that the Buick Special was a dependable companion, delivering consistent performance and a hint of class without emptying wallets. By the mid-1960s, the Oldsmobile Cutless found a comfortable position in America's driveways. Known for blending a touch of style with solid reliability, The Cutlass gave its owners something to brag about that wasn't just hot rod horsepower. It was a mid-size car that aimed to please a wide swath of buyers. Not too big, not too small, not too pricey, and not too bland. Just right for many practical-minded drivers. Under the hood, the Rocket Vibe 8 engines, famous in Oldsmobile circles, provided a reliable source of power. They weren't finicky or overly complicated. With regular tune-ups and fluid changes, these engines just kept humming along, mile after mile. The Cutlass's body was well constructed, and while not immune to rust, it often weathered the years better than some of its rivals. Meanwhile, the interior wasn't as lavish as a top-end Cadillac, but it offered a pleasant atmosphere with comfortable seating and user-friendly controls. The Cutlass did have its limitations. Some enthusiasts found it a bit tame, lacking the wild personality of true muscle cars. Others lamented that it was neither the cheapest nor the most luxurious option, but that middle ground positioning is exactly what made it accessible to many. The Cutlass was a bridge between extremes, focusing on steady, trouble-free ownership. Today, folks who remember the 60s fondly recall the Cutlass as the sensible friend, trustworthy, straightforward, and never too flashy, yet always ready to deliver a smooth, hassle-free drive. The Pontiac Tempest name might instantly conjure up images of the legendary GTO, since the GTO started as an option package on the Tempest. But look beyond the muscle car glory, and you'll find that the standard Tempest itself was a surprisingly reliable, affordable midsize offering. This was the kind of car that could haul the family around without constant trips to the mechanic, all while wearing a brand name known for a touch of performance flair. One of the Tempest's neat tricks was its simple yet robust drivetrain. With a straightforward inline-6 or V8 under the hood, it wasn't prone to chronic mechanical issues if you stuck to regular maintenance. Pontiac engineers knew how to craft engines that provided decent power and longevity. Unlike some more particular models of the era, the Tempest was generally forgiving, meaning you didn't need to be an experienced enthusiast to keep it running smoothly. It didn't come without compromises, though. The Tempest styling might not have captured everyone's imagination, especially when not enhanced with GTO badges and stripes. The base interiors could feel a little basic, and some owners found the suspension tuning a bit too soft. Yet the Tempest resonated with middle-class Americans who wanted a vehicle they could be proud to own without constant maintenance issues. While the GTO enjoyed more attention in the long run, the unassuming Tempest deserves its own appreciation as a reliable, sensible driver that showcased a taste of performance heritage in an everyday car. These 12 classics remind us that reliability doesn't always come with a roar or a flashy ad campaign. They were the cars that made everyday life possible. From morning commutes to weekend getaways, steady companions that didn't require deep pockets or endless tinkering. In a decade known for style and speed, these models forged their own legacy by simply getting the job done. Today, as we celebrate the charm of the 1960s, it's worth remembering these humble heroes. Their reliability ensured that the American dream kept rolling down the highways, one dependable ride at a time. Thanks for watching.